But I'm going to introduce the panelists now. So on the far right, we have Kay Kahn, a state representative. Kay Kahn has represented Newton in the Massachusetts House of Representatives since 1995. She was originally appointed by Speaker Robert DeLeo in 2009 to serve as the House Chair of the Joint Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities, and has served in this capacity ever since. Chair Kahn is one of the legislator's most outspoken advocates for progressive policies, including incarcerated individuals, including women and juveniles, public health, and healthcare reform legislation. Then we have Shanta Rajanran, yes, sorry. And Ms. Rajanran has more than 15 years of automotive industry experience with a specialization in human-machine interface. She is a Michigan researcher who has been granted a patent for steering wheel switch that connects with the driver's wearable device and turns off notifications. She also has another patent granted for a car infotainment unit, which can be reduce the fatigue of drivers and keep them engaged. She would like to be an inspiration for female inventors and encourages them to explore the usage of technology for public safety. Then we have Ayla Israeli. Ayla Israeli is an assistant professor of business administration in the marketing unit at Harvard Business School. Her research focuses on pricing, channel management, and online marketing. She earned her PhD in marketing from the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University. She holds an MCC and BSc in computer science for the Hebrew University of Jerusalem and an MBA from Hebrew University. In addition to her academic experience, Professor Israeli served as a lieutenant in the intelligence corps of the Israeli Defense Forces and worked as an engineer at Israel Aerospace Industries and at Intel Corporation in Israel. And finally, right here, we have Desi. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to say your last name, has over 25 years of executive leadership experience in the global automotive industry. She joined Ford Motor Company in 1991 and is currently the director of Ford's Global Automotive Strategy Office. Her educational background includes BS in electrical engineering, MS in industrial and systems engineering, and an MBA from the University of Michigan. Ford has recently recognized her with an Excellence in Leadership Award and a Diversity Executive Champion Award. So thank you for coming as speakers. Let's just give them a round of applause. So to start us off, can you just give us a little idea of what your career path has been like? And I sort of gave you a short introduction, but anything else you'd like to highlight about your experience? And anyone can start us off.
So good afternoon, everyone. I just want to make sure, is there anybody from Newton here? Ah, my goodness, great. That's great. So my name is Kay Kahn, and I'm a state representative, and I represent the city of Newton. So there are 160 state representatives in Massachusetts, and there are 40 senators in Massachusetts. So altogether in the Massachusetts legislature, in Boston, we work in Boston under the Golden Dome. That's the State House, and that's where we meet. And there are 200 of us, and we represent, so the state representatives represent about 40,000 constituents, and so there are two main legislators in Newton, and so we represent, two of us represent the city of Newton because it's about 85,000 people, and there's one legislator who represents a little bit of Newton, Watertown, and Waltham. Are you all from Massachusetts, or are you from different parts of the country? Okay. So basically, what I'm going to talk about in terms of the legislature and my path to the legislature is really not all that different in any state. So every state has a legislature. In some states, it's called the state assembly. I think in California, it's called the state assembly. But the legislature, so we are elected. We are elected every 2 years. So this year, 2018, is an election year. It's an election year for all the state representatives, all the state senators, all across America. And it's also the congressional delegation, the people who go to Washington, the congressmen, they are also up for re-election this year. And in some cases, senators are up for re-election if they are up. They are in office for 6 years, so there's kind of a rotating number of people running. So here in Massachusetts, well, all over the country, it's a big election year, 2018. I'm sure you must be aware of that. So there's a lot of activity going on. So we're all running for re-election. Even if you don't have an opponent, you're out there running for re-election, letting your constituents know who you are, and also helping other candidates who are up for re-election. So in Massachusetts, so every state has 2 senators that go to Washington. So there are 100 senators, and in Massachusetts, we have 1 senator who's up for reelection, that's Senator Warren. And so there's a big push to push her back into the Senate in Washington, D.C. So I'm just going to mention, I'll try to be clear about it, but so we are elected every 2 years, and we have a great opportunity to not only serve our constituents and serve our community, but we also have an opportunity to affect public policy. So we in the legislature, we make the laws for the state. And so that's a big thing, and often a lot of people don't really understand what a state representative does. There's much more attention to the people who run for Congress, and then people on the local level, but a lot of times people don't know, what the state legislature really does. But we are very important. We work with our local communities, and we also work with the delegation that goes to Washington. So we're sort of in the middle, but we affect a lot of change and a lot of laws here in Massachusetts. So for me, it's been a privilege and an honor to have this opportunity. It's a great opportunity, and I would suggest and recommend that all of you consider thinking about government. I think government is a great political science. Government is a great area to specialize in as an undergraduate. And you get to learn a lot about what's going on in the world, in the country. And I think right now, I don't know about all of you, but I think most of us are sort of tuned in almost every day to what's going on in Washington. And so a lot of what we do on the state level is to really prepare to protect lots of things here in the state that we know may not get protected in Washington. So so my story really is that when I started out, I was around the age of 9. I decided 2 things. One is that I wanted to be a ballerina, and the other was that I wanted to be a nurse. So I did the ballet until about age 20, pretty seriously, and then I moved into at Boston University, into the nursing program at Boston University. So I had the opportunity to really explore both areas. And it was, for me, very, very interesting and very exciting. And I guess what I would say is that it's great to sort of specialize in something if you're going to even think about running for office or getting involved in government. And for me, having the nursing background, and I'm also a psychiatric nurse, so that's been really helpful to me in terms of my role in the Massachusetts legislature. So when I was in college, I heard John Kennedy, President Kennedy, say, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. And so I really took that to heart, and I signed up for the Peace Corps. I did the training for the Peace Corps, but then didn't actually go. I stayed behind. I got married. I had a few children, and I went back to college to get a master's degree in psychiatric nursing. But I volunteered in my community in the city of Newton. I've been there for a long, long time, so I volunteered in the Parent Teachers Association, and I also became more interested in politics. I joined in the city of Newton, and in every city and town all across the country, you have the grassroots part of the legislature or of politics, and every city and town all across the country has a Democratic city or Democratic city committee or town committee, or a Republican city or committee or town committee. And they have both, so you can join either one. And for me, I joined the Democratic City Committee in the city of Newton, and I used to help candidates running for office, and got very interested in what was going on and wanting to know more about politics and how our country was being run. So I then, I just looked around and I thought, oh, well, maybe I could bring something to the legislature. And so I decided to put myself out there and run for office. There was a woman who was the state representative at the time, and she was stepping down to run for mayor. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll run for her seat, and I did. And I was very successful. I actually had 5 men running against me, but I won. And that was actually 24 years ago. So I've been in the legislature now for 24 years, and I have been very fortunate in that my constituents, I try to keep them happy and vote the way they'd like me to vote. And Newton is a very progressive community, and so that was easy for me. And I just feel that it's been a great privilege And I guess I see myself, I think in all, when I look back, I think I was kind of a risk taker. And I stood out and decided to run for office, which I had never, ever done before. And so I found myself a campaign manager, and we stepped out. And I remember the first time I started out, I said to my campaign manager, so can we do this without lawn signs or stickers? And she's like, well, how are people going to know who you are and what you're doing? So I had to kind of get over that and step out and get very actively involved with the lawn signs and with the stickers and help people know who I am and what I was running for and why I was running for public office. So I was elected in 1995, and I like to say that state representatives do three things. One is that we like to represent our constituents. We try to help our constituents if they have difficulties sort of understanding the bureaucracy, getting through the bureaucracy. We work with our communities, anything to do with like transportation, anything on the state level, transportation or healthcare or public safety. And so I've had a lot of things going on in my community around transportation in particular. And so that's given me an opportunity to really represent the community. And then the third thing is to have the opportunity to affect public policy. So I was fortunate enough that I was appointed to be the House Chair of the Committee on Children, Families, and Persons with Disabilities 10 years ago. And for me, that's been a very wonderful opportunity because it gives me a chance to really help children and families all across Massachusetts and work in areas of child abuse and neglect and try to work with families that really need those extra services to help them. So it's just been sort of an interesting opportunity. I sort of went, when I first came in, I was what they call rank and file. I was just kind of like everybody else, but gradually was able to move up and become the chair of this committee. And in fact, it's interesting because people will wonder, how did you get to be a chair? And it's all very political. So in Massachusetts, everything is political. So I supported the person who actually won the election to become the Speaker of the House, so he appointed me to become the chair of the Committee on Children and Families. So it's been interesting in that, I guess for me, having different opportunities to step up and to be a leader, although I don't think I think about it that way, but there are things that have happened along the way that really have shown that that I have taken a leadership position. And for example, when I first came into the legislature, there's a caucus of women legislators, and I just want to mention that the reason I'm sort of pitching the idea of thinking about public service or running for office or even working in the legislature is because we don't have enough women that are really out there and doing the work that really needs to get done. And in the Massachusetts legislature, I've been there for 24 years, and we have not moved from 25% of women. And so it's sort of discouraging. And I think that what happens for women is women don't like to step up and do these kinds of things unless they know something 200%. So we as women feel like we have to know everything before we can step out and take a chance. And so it's been an interesting experience for me, and unfortunate that it hasn't really improved. So we're still looking for women. I think this year, there's been, because of what's been happening in Washington, there are many more women actually running for public office this year. So we'll see what happens, both on the local level, in the cities and towns, on the state level, where I work, and then also on the national level. So we're seeing more women step up. And I think that after the election in 2016, many women came forward, and women who hadn't been involved. And I really encourage all of you to get involved, to really understand what's going on around you, what the issues are in your communities, and what are the issues on the state level. And it's interesting, and I've actually had high school students come to me and say, oh, I see that you're working on a particular bill. We would like to get involved. And two bills that have come up where I had high school students come to my office and want to help was a bill that I filed on ending child marriage. And I know that sort of piques people's interest because they're like, children getting married here in Massachusetts? And it's actually happening that children are getting married under the age of 18. 18 is supposed to be, You're not supposed to get married until you're at least 18, but it is happening because families will come forward or parents will come forward and they'll go to court and they'll say, we want our child to marry this person. And so often those are much older men, and the families are sort of giving their children up or their daughters up to this kind of a situation. So it is happening in Massachusetts, and we did file legislation to put a bright line, a ban on child marriage under the age of 18. Unfortunately, it didn't move this session. We will be filing it again, but it's something that actually interested a whole group of students at Brookline High School who came forward and wanted to know more about this issue because they felt that these are girls that are their own age where this is happening. And so they got involved, and they helped us do some lobbying and get the word out, and we did some exciting things with them to help them understand the whole process of how a bill becomes a law. It's a very long and complicated process. The other law that has been on the books for a long time, something that I've worked on for a long time, is something called banning conversion therapy. And so there is this issue where there are therapists out there who are basically saying that you can pray away the gay, so to speak, and that they will get you into some kind of very serious kind of therapy that will try to change you as a person and what your beliefs are. And so I was very excited that just about 2 weeks ago we were able to move that bill out of the House of Representatives, and we're now waiting for the Senate to do it. And so this is really something that will very much help the LGBTQ community, and so we're looking forward to that. But that, again, I had students from Natick who came forward, and they actually did a whole video on this. They had something going on at school where they were supposed to pick an issue in the legislature and do some research. And so they came to me and they actually interviewed me about conversion therapy, and they did a whole interview that they then presented to their own class. So there's lots of things going on out there, and I don't know about your schools, whether they have you getting into looking at issues and things that are going on in the school system, on the state level, and helping you sort of think about what might make sense in terms of making life better here in the state of Massachusetts. So I've had lots of experiences of working on legislation, chairing this committee on children and families, and when I came in the very beginning, I had an opportunity to be the chair of the Caucus of Women Legislators. So we have a caucus, a group of all the women come together, and they try to stick together and move things forward that really relate to women. And so it was early on in my career in the legislature, and so one of the things that I looked at when I became the chair, the House chair, was that I realized that they hadn't really organized. They didn't have like a board of directors. They didn't have a newsletter. They didn't have something called a brown bag lunch or a way to come together and talk about issues that were of importance to them. And the other thing that happened was that that the woman who was the staff person for the Caucus of Women Legislators came to me and she said, the office for the women is in the sub-basement of the State House, and it is disgusting. It's got mice running around, and it was really awful. So the first thing I did was to figure out a way to convince the leadership that they had to give us a better space for the caucus. And so what happened was that they did finally give us a room, and there was a big meeting with all the leadership about a law that passed that related to women. And the Boston Globe was there, and this woman who I had invited to come, she was a columnist for the Boston Globe, and I had talked to her for quite a while and invited her to come and speak to the women. What is it like to be a woman in journalism compared to what we go through as women in the legislature? And she was quite interested, and so after we had this big press conference about an issue related to women, she left a note on my chair, and she said, I don't care about the bill that got passed for women, but I do want to know how you found the room, or how you got the room for the women. So she was very excited about that, and she wrote a story about how we had been successful in getting a woman for the room for the Women's Caucus. So just lots of things that we get to do as legislators. Another area that's been really of interest to me is looking at the women who get involved in the criminal justice area. And these are women who come into prison for various reasons, and they most all of them leave behind children, and how this affects the children of these women. And so started out very early in my career in the legislature, having a particular interest in really trying to help the women and move forward and draw attention to what the needs are for women, which is much different than the needs for men. And so little things like trying to, there were many women who come in because families don't know what to do with them if they're seriously substance abusing, and end up in the prison system as a result of families not knowing what to do, bring them to court, are desperate, and so the judge will send them off to prison, and they haven't really committed a crime. So we were able, after many, many years of really pushing information out about how these women needed treatment, not being to be held in prison. Finally, after I think I worked on it for at least 20 years, we were able to move them now to a place where they are getting treatment rather than sitting in prison. And the other thing that was that I had also worked on quite a bit for these women is that when these women were pregnant and ready to deliver a baby, they were shackled when they were ready to deliver, to go off to the hospital. They were shackled with their arms behind their backs. If you can imagine being pregnant and ready to deliver a baby and having to have your arms shackled. And so after, again, it was another 20 years before somebody said, hey, what's really going on here? And so we were able to make that change too. So we got rid of the shackling by passing a law so to protect women when they're ready to deliver. So there are lots of things that come up in the legislature that you have an opportunity to write a law, to really work on it, to get a lot of advocacy behind it, and even young people who see things that they would like to also become involved in too. So I really urge you all to get involved, to see what's going on within your schools, maybe form clubs that will offer an opportunity for you to see more about what's happening. I know civics is something that we're trying to bring back to the classroom, to the school system, and we just passed a law actually that's going to be moving forward in Massachusetts to have civics come back into the education system in middle school and high school. So, I mean, that's a little bit of what I've been doing, and just very happy to have had an opportunity to support things like equal marriage. So now anyone can get married to whomever they wish, and that was we were one of the first states to do that. And then one thing that was really exciting this week is that we were able to celebrate something called Lift the Cap. So when I came into the legislature, one of the first votes that I took was a vote against a bill on welfare reform that was going through the country, and they were trying to really make it much harder for women, and they passed a law that said that if any woman became pregnant after she happened to get on to welfare, that there would be no services or subsidies for the child that was born after this woman became involved in welfare reform. And so thousands and thousands of kids all across Massachusetts, mothers were not getting enough money to buy food, and they would have to choose between buying food or buying drugs, medicines or other things for their children. And so we've just passed a law this week actually called Lift the Cap, to take the cap off of this law that was saying that mothers wouldn't get an extra $100 to help them a month to help them with food for their child that was born when they actually after they became needy and were on welfare. And these kids are, and we all know that you have to have food in order to do well in school and to be able to carry on with your education. And so families are really struggling. There's a lot of food insecurity out there. There's a lot of homelessness. There's something we call unaccompanied homeless youth. There are lots of youth who are homeless, and many of them are LGBTQ kids whose families don't know what to do with them, don't want them. And so these kids often end up what we say is couch surfing. So they look for beds and places to sleep, and they stay a bit underground because they don't want to be recognized as being unaccompanied without a family, because then they might have to leave the school system that they're in. So I just want to reiterate that there are lots and lots of problems out there. We need good people to step up and think about becoming involved at least involved in your own communities, to think about what's going on around you in government, and a change that needs to happen, and for women to get involved. And I would urge you to think about what you'd like to do in the future. I think it's good to have a career.
I'm so glad you brought the last portion where like you talked about like, moms struggling to bring food and like, like to the family. That's kind of my story where like, where like when I was like so young, like when I was in like third grade, like I had this like where like my family situation was like my mom was struggling to like, bring food to the family. My dad was not making income, and like that's kind of my background. That's where I started thinking that like, I need to go to like, work. I need to have a very good job so that I do not have that financial struggles which my mom had. Like, so at a very young age, like at a third grade, I said to myself, I'm going to take the biggest job and then like, bring to my family so that I can be very self-supportive of like, like, so that's kind of my shorter version of my story. And then like, I was the first, like, girl to go to school, like finish high school, and I was the first girl to become an engineer in my family, and I was the first one to travel to another country for work, and I was probably the last one in my family to get married and have a kid because of like my career aspirations. But then like I'm so glad that I did it. I'm so glad that like I broke all those barriers, because like that's what has made me myself. Like that's what has brought myself like as a person, how do I say, identity for me, rather than like following suit and like following behind a man for the family, taking care of the family. I still take care of my family, I still take care of my daughter, but then like anything happens at my family, for my husband or anything, I can be self-supportive of the family. So that's that for that, like my mom was a very big encouragement, and even like like an influence in that aspect. So I'm so glad that I did that. You want to share
Sure.
your story?
My name is Ayelet Israeli. I grew up in Israel. I think whenever I look back at my childhood, I realized how privileged I was growing up. My mother was a lawyer, my dad was a doctor. I grew up believing I can be whatever I want. I grew up believing that when something is wrong, then you should speak up. It doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman or whatever. You should just be your authentic self and say what's on your mind. Let me start in high school quickly. So when I was in high school, my electives was physics. So there, I think there were 4 girls in the class. My other elective was AP Computer Science, where I was the only girl. And it didn't matter to me. It wasn't something special. It was just, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do that. And then when you graduate high school in Israel, most people, there is a mandatory military service, so I joined the military. I was in the intelligence force. In general, the service is 2 years for women or for girls and 3 years for men. I ended up serving 3 years because I went on to a commander course. So I was basically an officer. I was in charge of other people that 2 days earlier, or not 2 days, but like a year earlier, I was their peer. So that was quite an interesting element. And working also in other environments, it happens quite a lot. Like you're in a small team, and then one of you gets promoted, and suddenly this person is the boss of the team. So that's a very interesting dynamic of how you evolve as a leader and a manager. When I finished my military service, I decided to go to school. I went again for computer science. I think by then about 20% of the class was women, but not that much more. I also worked for a few years as an engineer in Israel, both in Intel and in the Israel aerospace industries. At some point, I decided that I want to go back to school. I decided to get my PhD in quantitative marketing. It's essentially a subfield of economics with touches of computer science influences and management, but at the end of the day, you look at problems that are interesting for managers, and you're trying to do the best to quantify things. My focus is particularly on pricing and just online behavior. And in addition, once I graduated, I decided I want to stay in academia. I want to become a professor. And then I started working here at the Harvard Business School, where I teach the marketing course. The mission of the Harvard Business School is educating leaders who make a difference in the world. And I take this to heart. Essentially, every time I speak in front of a classroom or I see students, I feel like there is some influence that just me being there, standing there, makes some kind of difference in their lives. Before starting this job, I heard from people, well, you have two problems. One is that you look young. The other problem is that you are short, so standing in front of a classroom is going to be somewhat of an issue. I obviously ignored those things because, like I said, growing up, I believe I can do whatever I want, and I can say whatever I want, and things will be fine. And I believe that they are. So I don't know if you know these statistics, but for example, in public companies, there are more CEOs, chief executive officer, basically the top manager of the company, that their first name is John, than the total number of female CEOs. In business schools, the situation is not that much better, or in higher education, it's not that much better. I think in our faculty, about 20% are women, mostly on the more junior levels. Once you go to more senior levels or people that are there for a long period of time, there are fewer and fewer women. We'll probably talk about this more later, but part of this is just biases of society, norms of society, like what the previous speakers talked about. But like I said, I believe you can do whatever you want. The other thing that I think, so our mission is, educating leaders, and you can lead in many, many different ways. Being a leader doesn't necessarily mean you have to be, the top person in the organization. You can be a leader in a much smaller scale just by allowing diversity, making sure that everyone in the room gets to say their opinion, making sure that everyone feels comfortable. There are many, many ways to lead, and we shouldn't be afraid of this word or like what we can and cannot do, because we can really do whatever we put our hearts to. Yeah.
Fantastic. I'm last. I'm Dezio Ikashevich. I lead the Automotive Safety Office for Ford Motor Company. And as our host introduced me, I'm an engineer by discipline. I have both a bachelor's and master's in engineering and an MBA in marketing and in finance. And as I listen to your story, there's many parallels on my story, although probably different on the affluency scale. I am a first-generation immigrant. My family migrated here from what is now Montenegro, and when I arrived in Michigan, I spoke zero English. And I think I remember crying every day I started in first grade because I couldn't speak English. And I remember when I got a math exam, I was so excited because it was something I could actually do. But one of the things that parallels your story is I grew up in a culture where my father, who has now passed, rest his soul, and my mother encouraged us to be what we wanted to be. And I remember my father especially. I really didn't understand barriers. And I grew up in an environment perhaps with far less affluency, but in a world where I felt you could achieve anything, independent of gender. And if you know anything about Montenegro or the former Yugoslavia, as a culture, it's very male-dominated. And in the context of who typically goes on for further education and who is typified in terms of advancement, it's usually males. Obviously, I didn't stay there long. I came to the U.S. as I was, I think, 5 and a half. So most of my life, both as a child and obviously as an adult, was raised in an American environment. But I still find it interesting that the demographics of where women excel and where women end up are still far short to where we can be. And I'm really honored to be here in this forum to be able to share with you some of my experiences, and perhaps through the questions and the dialogue that we have, we can help reinforce what you're all capable of and how you can contribute to creating a more balanced representation of females in any of these fields. So if you talk about senior roles in engineering or academia or in leadership positions, I'm very fortunate in Ford Motor Company. I'm one of the most senior level leaders, and I've had an opportunity to do many different roles. I've engineered numerous commodities, subsystems, systems, vehicles. I've had responsibility for huge programs from an engineering like Explorer or Mustang, some programs that may resonate with you. I've also had an opportunity to live abroad. Ford Motor Company moved me to Germany, and I lived there for 3 years. And I can say probably one of the things I'm most proud of, I'm also a mom. I have 4 wonderful children, and my husband and I have been able to raise together in a world of conflicting demands. And as you all look through your journey to your further education and where you end up, I can promise you there's lots of constraints and lots of pushes and pulls on your time. But I can tell you, as my colleagues who sit here in front of you today, there's so much enrichment that's out there, and you all have such a wonderful opportunity in front of you. And I'm hopeful that we can help to create a source of motivation to inspire you to excel and to do everything that we know you're capable of. So I'll pause there because I'm sure you'll have questions, and I don't want to waste a bunch of your time. I'd rather be able to answer your questions.
Great, thank you so much, guys. Can you guys name an exemplary moment or a moment that you're just truly proud of your leadership as a female? Anyone can start.
I got recently, like, I don't know how it happened, but coincidentally I got 3 awards back to back. That was really like a honorary moment for me, and like, you know, like one was Michigan's Most Valuable Millennial, and one was like Oakland County's Elite 40 under 40, and then I also won a Women in Technology World Series Leadership Project of the Year award. So all 3 awards came at kind of at the same time, and like I think it was kind of like I felt it was kind of like a recognition, an appreciation for like all my hard work for like past 16 years. That was the most exemplary moment in my career, I would say, and like especially the Women in Leadership Award, which came, it was a world recognition award, so like very honored at that point of time.
I can build on that. It's a similar type of award, but I'll tell you why I was most proud. I was named in 2010 one of the Automotive News Top 100 Women in the Global Automotive Industry. And our industry is pretty male-dominated, but this is an award that they carve out for women, particularly around the world. And what I was most proud of, not receiving the award, that was really awesome, but I had my mom join me in the ceremony for the women honorees. And as part of the ceremony, there's a mixer before, and so you're around and you have a lot of the executives, both male and females, but obviously the bulk of the population is females because we're the ones receiving the awards. And I remember my mom leaned over and she said, you know, this is really fantastic. And I said, oh, thank you, Mom. And I said, why? And she says, I've always been so worried that you're going to be in an environment with a group of all men. I'm so happy to see so many women. And I just chuckled because I thought, oh, this is so cool. I'm glad she took that away. And she didn't make the connection that only the women were invited. It was pretty cool.
You could go.
I guess I think you sort of said it. It's not like we set out necessarily to be leaders, but I think through a lot of hard work and interest in what you're doing, somehow it kind of comes out, and other people, I think, notice that you are providing something for the community. That's the way I felt. I'm always surprised, actually, when I get an award. I hadn't thought about it, and it's just doing the work and working hard and taking an interest And for example, the work that I've done on women in prison, people notice that. I do it because I really feel like it's so important that these women are just in a different kind of situation. There, by the grace of God, go I. I mean, it can happen to any of us. And I just feel this compassion and need to give back and to try and be helpful as best I can. But I think it can be seen sometimes as being a leader when you're not necessarily thinking that you're being that leader. You know, I gave the example of when I became the chair of the Caucus of Women Legislators. I just felt like nothing was happening, and I wanted to make sure that something did happen. And so just pulled together a bunch of different things that really made a difference and brought everybody to the table to have more discussion about what we could do moving forward. And I think for me, I feel like I've always been a strong collaborator. I like to bring stakeholders to the table, and that's really often very helpful. I had a situation recently where I was in a public hearing, so every law that gets filed, every bill that gets filed, it has a public hearing. And so we had a public hearing in front of my committee on children and families. And there were two women who came to talk about the fact that they had very disabled relatives, and they were very worried because of some of the changes in the law that their particular, in one case it was a brother, wasn't going to be able to do the things that he had been doing successfully for many, many years. And so I thought it made a lot of sense, what she was saying. And I knew that the laws were changing, and the laws have changed in Massachusetts and pretty much across the country, and that is to help people who are very seriously disabled, whether it's physically disabled or developmentally disabled, actually become more part of society, to be able to have little jobs and do what they're capable of doing. In fact, I have a young man who has Down syndrome who works in my office. He comes one day a week, and we give him things to do, and he does it very successfully. And so it helps to build a sense of self, to help people who are developmentally disabled have something that they feel good about. So anyway, so I brought together the several organizations, and including the Department of Developmental Disabilities, to talk about, the laws have changed, but what can we do to help these families? And it was successful because it turned out that the Department of Developmental Disabilities was kind of noticing the same thing. And so they were actually in the process of hiring someone that would then be available to families that had questions and things that they needed to take care of. So I think it's just a matter of, whatever it is, whatever direction you go in, whether it's any of these areas that these ladies have chosen to do, it's just doing what you feel is the right thing to do, and to put your heart and soul into it. And then people notice that somehow you've become a leader, even though you haven't necessarily set out to be a leader.
I feel a special pride when, at HBS, all of our classes are not lecture form, they're all discussion based. And historically, and it turns out this is just the way it is in population, oftentimes women feel less comfortable speaking in public. And whenever I see a change in a student where in the beginning she was very shy and would raise their hand maybe like this and didn't want to make eye contact with me, the moment that they go like this, I feel a special sense of pride and inclusion. The other bit of this is actually something I see in men. So one of our case discussions is around, so like I said, I'm in marketing, is around how women and different body forms are portrayed in advertising. And whenever I'm in that class and men speak strongly about their experiences, oftentimes so our students are around 27-year-old, so some of them have children. Oftentimes it's actually the men that are recent parents, and they suddenly, something clicks in their head about the way women grow up, that they just never understood that it's even an issue. They never had to open a magazine and see, how models look like, or cosmetic ads, or any of these things. And the moment that it clicks for them and they see it, I'm kind of extra happy because it's something so small, but all of us basically go through this our entire life and think about this our entire life. But once someone puts themselves in someone else's position or really understand what they're going through, it's, for me, it's something that is, that makes me very proud.
Thank you so much, guys. So what is one way exercising leadership has always come easy to you, and one way it's challenged you?
So can I start? Yeah. So one of the things I love talking about and thinking about, primarily it's driven by research, but also just the way that men and women happen to lend different roles in society is the biases that we have. And a lot of them are implicit. We don't intend them to happen, but it turns out that, for example, if a man and woman give exactly the same speech or say exactly the same thing, men are perceived as very competent and very assertive, and women are perceived as kind of aggressive, and they talk too much, and they should watch their tones. And I think the nicest version of the B word I heard is bossy, and kind of things like that. And it turns out that it's not just that men portray men and women this way, but also women do it. And women often penalize other women even more than men do. And to me, one of the most difficult things to do is to try to de-bias yourself from that. So it's very, very hard because this is just, it's implicit. We're just listening to someone and we judge them, and it turns out that we judge women slightly differently than we judge men. So to me, that's one of the most difficult exercises to do, to kind of step back and kind of try to de-gender or de-sex the person that is talking and try to think, oh, how would I react to this, or how would I judge this if instead of a woman, this was a man? And it turns out that it's a very important thing to do. Another example is it turns out that in meetings, typically men get way more airtime than women, and women are much more likely to be spoken over, even by other women. So sort of taking control of yourself and making sure that a woman is not interrupted, or helping other women realize, like, hey, Liz was just speaking, let her continue. So these are things that you kind of need to train yourself to do, but I think are super important to actually get women to speak up, because what I learned over time is that not everyone was as privileged as me and feels as comfortable as me speaking up, saying their opinion, sharing their opinion, and you got to find ways to help them. So it's hard to do, but over time it gets easier.
Oh, I love your answer. I think the one add I would make is also one of the big reasons I'm here today, and perhaps my colleagues as well, is I think as women, we need to serve as advocates for other women, which is, I think, the basis of some of your summary. I do believe, and history and the data supports that there are biases, and a lot of them are unconscious biases around just how we typify people that are related to gender. And as females, I think the best things that you can do is be that resource for other females. And as you continue in your journey of life and through your education and career, be that advocate for other women, because I think it creates a stronger network, and it creates an environment where people feel safer to talk and to have a point of view and to command a seat at the table. It's something I work really hard at Ford Motor Company, is to make sure that women take a seat at the table. A lot of times you're afforded a seat, and sometimes you elect not to take that because you have these other thoughts behind, as you think through. And I know one of the questions, we might not get to it, is about one of the things that you've learned. One of the things I've learned is don't overthink things. And I think you can only learn that with experiences. Sometimes you kind of overthink a scenario and how you fit into that world and what your role may or should be. I'd say that, learn to be that confident self, and that your perspective matters and your voice matters, and you having a voice and taking a seat at the table is not disrespectful or irrelevant. It's very relevant, and it really contributes to the totality of the discussion.
Always given leadership positions all through my career, and I was thinking that it's mostly because of the attention to details I had, my observation power, and like my responsibility to deliver, that trust was always there with like my managers and like my organization, that they were offering me leadership positions. But what struggle I had, or what challenge I had, was like, since I had that technical like knowledge and that depth of knowledge, like it was very hard for me, like, you know, like beginning of my career, it was hard for me to trust that to my, like, you know, like my resources, my team members, like to trust that and delegate them. That was the challenge I had initially in my career, when like whatever I know very easily how to do, how can I let them do it, and how I can, like, you know, as a successful team, how we can all accomplish together. That was a challenge, like, you know, like the trust my organization had on me, how can I have that trust on my team to succeed?
I think we still have a long way to go. I think that we're getting there, but I really encourage all of you to really make sure your voices are heard, and to do things like join debate teams in school and learn how to really speak out. I think, you know, when you have opportunities, and to make sure that you're heard, that your voices are heard. And I can see in the legislature, for example, and all across the country, we have many more men in all of the positions of government, and the women really need to step up, and they need to get out there, and to because women have a much different voice, I think, in terms of some of the issues that are so important to children, to families, to people with disabilities, to all of the issues that are important. And so I just encourage all of you, you're young, get involved, develop expertise in areas that are of interest, and really step up in whatever field that you go in, and make sure your voices are heard. It's been not so easy in the legislature. It's definitely a male-dominated world, and it's not easy. And I think you have to be persistent. I had a situation just recently, last couple of weeks, when I've been advocating for climate control, and filed an amendment to a bill to make some positive movement forward in terms of climate control. And I can't tell you how difficult it was to get that point across. And in the end, I was successful, but it took a lot of work. And so I think it's true that the men are often heard. I know that in the legislature, when the men get up to speak, they seem to have a much easier time. They make jokes, they talk, they get heard. And when the women get up, we also still feel that we have to know something 200% before we can get up and talk on a particular issue. So I think we have to be much more comfortable with ourselves, comfortable with our voices, and really figure out how we can be heard, I think, much better than we are. And I think we're all dependent on the next generation. And I also really love to have one of the pleasures in my office, for example, is that every summer I have young people from high school or college who come in, and we have a program at the State House that young people can come in and be interns for the summer, and they can learn more about government. And you have had the same experience where we have young people who will come in and be very shy and frightened about what they're encountering. But again, I think you see them mature and become more confident as time goes on. So I would just encourage all of you, like I said, to get involved, to join debate teams, to be in situations where you have the opportunity to speak up and to share your opinions and let them be heard.
Great. So what's the biggest roadblock that you as a woman have run into over the course of your experience, and was there ever a time that you wanted to quit?
Well, I will just say that I would encourage all of you, if you haven't done so already, to see the movie RBG, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because it was very helpful to me when I was trying to get my point across about the climate control. Because you just can't give up. You have to keep going. You have to do what you think is the right thing to do, and just spend the time doing it, and do what you need to do. So if you haven't heard of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she is a Supreme Court justice. She's been there a long time. She's 85 years old. She is powerful. She is, you know, the balance in the Supreme Court is more conservative than progressive. She's very progressive, and I would encourage all of you to see that. She's an inspiration, I think, for women. And it was wonderful for me to see it, and I feel like when I'm feeling discouraged, I can think back to people that have been really quite, I think, influential in our, you know, in our communities and in our lives, and over the years.
My biggest roadblock has been like, you know, not having enough growth. What I wanted, like few years back, I was kind of feeling like stuck in the same position. I was an immigrant, I was on a visa, I was having this contract position. I couldn't really go further than that. And then like, I just had a baby, and like, I was like, okay, this is not how I want to be. Like, this is not where I want to be. Like, how do I go to the next step, right? So I started doing my master's in management degree, like, you know, online. And my daughter was just 8 months old, and like she was like, you know, going through something like where like doctor said, like when you're nursing her, like you need to be on a allergen-free diet. That's the most worst thing you can go through. You can literally not eat anything bought in stores, like in restaurants, like, so it's a very scary situation, right? Like, so I went through that, and then I graduated with highest honors, and like the graduation ceremony started with my speech, and like, you know, was a what I felt like going through that education, like going through that program, like even amidst like whatever was happening, like a full-time job and a baby and like a demanding husband who wanted me to like cook and like clean and everything, like it's very nice, but then like, you know what I mean, like, so what I felt was like I was really growing myself, like irrespective of what job opportunities I was given, what growth I was having at my work, that education I was getting, that was making me feeling that like, you know, I was growing, I have like all the needed tools with me, all the skill set with me to like really like, you know, when that opportunity comes, I can be really like, you know, like be on spot, like really contribute. So the time came, I was able to go and talk to like my director and like say that, okay, this is all what I have accomplished. I got this and this, like, you know, I know exactly what you are trying to do, organizational change. I have learned about it. I can really help with it. I was able to go and like pitch to him, and then like, you know, get a great job, like move from Georgia to Michigan. So that was the biggest roadblock I was facing several years back, wherein like I was not having growth, but then like I was able to overcome that with an educational opportunity.
Maybe I'm naive, but I don't perceive any roadblocks that I had as specific to me because I'm a woman. I perceive myself as a person, and something that happens, it just happens to people in my position, and it's not specifically because I'm a woman. And I think, I mean, it might be a different perspective, but I think if you constantly feel that you're more victimized because you're a woman, that's not a way for me to live. I think we should all be our best selves. We should all be authentic to ourselves. For me, what works is to be blunt or sarcastic or direct. It definitely doesn't work for other people. I definitely learned that some people don't like that someone else is direct and tells them their opinion, but you can manage that. But I don't think that I experienced a special roadblock because I'm a woman.
And to be honest, I've been pretty fortunate in my career and have had so many opportunities. So I'll pass on this question. I'll answer the next one.
I love that response. So what do you think needs to be changed in relation to female leadership in STEM, politics, and/or business, if any?
Okay, I can take that one since I passed on the other one. I think what needs to be changed is we need to continue to encourage women to partake. Because a lot of what happens is what I call self-exit. We choose not to participate in those industries or those technologies for whatever reason. Some of them are our own internal biases. That's why events like today and other resource groups that you can join, and I encourage you to continue to seek those resource groups to give you a broader perspective. Because there are so many opportunities in STEM. I actually personally prefer STEAM. I prefer to add arts to the entire equation because I believe that science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics just is an enriching way to really canvas your options. I can only promise you through my own experiences that I've had so many awesome positions, roles of leadership, have opportunities to have huge financial impact to the company. I've run small groups, big groups, and I can tell you that's because I've had a good foundation from an educational perspective, but I've also been open to opportunities, which is probably why I don't perceive myself as having roadblocks. A lot of times we create those roadblocks because, again, it was the one thing that I would teach my younger self is a lot of times you think through a scenario way past your actual ability to think through it. You don't actually know what the future may entail or hold. And sometimes just letting yourself experiment with options in the technologies and academia and in the world, you can find that you can make a broader contribution than you may have set out to. I mean, I think if you talk to 100 people who, from where they started, their academia life to where they end up in the work life, so many of us have gone from one place to another. I started at U of M in a pre-med and ended, and now I'm in a senior executive engineering role. And I think it was a natural kind of organic evolution, but I would have never drawn that. And so I think that there's lots of opportunities. I encourage you to explore them, and that's what I think will make a difference.
I think there is a lot more to change. I would say almost every difference we talked about between men and women and where men and women are in society is a result of culture and biases, and not because there are actually strong differences that would lead us to behave in a different way or lead in a different way, but it's all a result of education and culture and tradition. And it's the responsibility of each and every one of us. And I tell this to men, I tell this to women. It's not just the responsibility of women to be an ally and an advocate for other women. And there are many, many ways to do it. We mentioned a few of them, asking for their opinion. If you realize that someone is not comfortable speaking, even in a small group, ask them before the meeting what is their opinion, and in the meeting say, hey, by the way, Desi told me before the meeting she had this great idea, blah, 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 and speak up for her. And you can do it if you're a man or if you're a woman. And even this small interaction, even if we are peers in the lowest level of the organization, is a form of leadership, is a form of including another person. And it's just so easy to do. And it took me a while growing up to realize that, hey, not everyone actually goes there and says their opinion like me, and it's not because something is wrong with them. It's just, this is the way this is the values I believe in. They believe in other values. They have their own reasons why they do this, but I can try to help them. I can try to advocate for them, and I think it's just each and every one of us should do whatever we can that there is actual equality in society.
I think women just like how Chair Khan was saying, women just have a different voice, not just the voice level, the audible level, but they really do have I think we are high in emotional intelligence, we do have that care factor, the motherly nature in us, and I think we are calculated risk takers, so that's one thing we were emphasizing. We want to be 200% strong, right? So we want to take calculated risk. We don't want to so that's something there. But then that's positive on its own. And organizations needs to start seeing the value we bring to the table. What that the level of emotional intelligence we have, or the risk handling, what we do. I think organizations need to start realizing that, and then there's a lot of changes needs to be done with respect to encouraging women with respect to flexible hours and child care and sick leave and a lot of different things. These are the ones which is going to support women to take care of their family and also succeed in career. So there's a lot of room. I've been so lucky with the job opportunities I have had. My organizations have been always flexible with these things that I didn't face that struggle, but then it's a difficult situation. So I've gone through this wherein pumping milk for the baby, like, at work, right? Like, so how much flexibility we have, like how much, the time it takes, the accommodations, there's laws about this, like there's regulations about this, like, like what they need to provide and everything, but then still, like, you kind of feel odd in the middle of the office, like, you want to go and, like, support this activity, like you want to do that, but then, like, organizations need to be, like, very flexible, educate, like, the team members, and, like, how it's, like, how being a woman is, like, different, and, like, encourage both men to support women, like, so we have a long way to go, according to me.
Well, I'm happy to say that in Massachusetts, we did just pass a law that gives 12 weeks of parental leave for men and women. They each can take 12 weeks of parental leave, and we're very excited about that. And we are, working on many other things that I think will be helpful to women, and I think that's a very important statement to make. I would just say that, again, what I've said earlier is we don't have enough women in elected office. I would urge all of you, if you're from Massachusetts, you can actually register to vote if you're 16. Even though you can't vote until you're 18, you can now go to the RMV and online, and you can register to vote. I think it's really important because it gets you more interested and aware of what's going on around you. There's a tremendous amount coming out of Washington these days. I think it's critical for women to understand what needs to happen. We just passed a law in Massachusetts to get rid of archaic laws that have been on the books for years, having to do with pro-choice, not allowing women to have abortions, and having to not even being able to get any kind of contraceptions unless you're married. I mean, those are really some archaic laws that were in the books. We just got rid of that because we're worried about what's going to come down from Washington. So I would encourage all of you, if you can, register to vote. If you know women candidates, I think, as you were saying, that it's good to support and advocate for women. If you know women candidates that are running for office, help them, step in, go knock on doors for them, and introduce them to your constituents. We have to get more women in elected office, because the women are the ones that really, it's been shown that they're the ones that they sponsor more bills, they pass more laws, they bring more money back to their communities. And so, work as interns in offices if you have time during the summer. But I just have to put in that plug. We just need more women to get involved in politics and to really get a sense of what's going on around you, because a lot of what happens in government affects all of our lives, all across the board. So I think it's important to take that into consideration.
So what has prepared you most to be a leader and to be in a leadership role, and what would you recommend our audience does to prepare to be a leader?
Nothing came so easily for me, the education, and it took time to get whatever I wanted, and that gave me kind of the patience, and persistence. I didn't give up, but then I waited for long. So that kind of prepared me, accepting that as a fact that things don't come so easily, and you need to hard work, you need to have some patience and persistence. That helped me, and that kind of helped me build resiliency also, wherein when I have some failures, or when I have some roadblocks, I know that okay, I can come through this shall pass, and I will succeed. So that as something has helped me prepared, wherein I know that for a fact that okay, I need to be patient, and I need to be persistent, and I will get it no matter what.
Don't be afraid to fail. You learn so much from failures, and no failure is the end of the world, is what I will say.
Yeah, I think that's a really good perspective. And what has most prepared me is just experiences. The more experiences you're willing to take and to explore things that may be even a bit far-reaching, I think that will give you confidence, and confidence makes you a stronger leader. I do honestly believe we can lead at any level. Titles don't make you fancy leaders. I mean, they give you a bigger source of responsibility, but it's how you influence And you can be a person of influence in any capacity. I mean, you're a person of influence within your social group, within your network community, within your home community, within, you know, and I think that's what prepares you to be a leader, is to be able to really embrace that, and the role that you can take in influencing others, and risk taking and failures all come as part of that journey, and there's nothing wrong with it. To me, you know, a failure is just another experience. It's how you deal with it. And that's the biggest learning, and I think that's what has well prepared me.
I agree with everything that's said. I think it's just, you know, persistence, just keep going. When you know you're on the right path and maybe other people are in your way, just continue on and have your voices heard and just put in the effort. And like as a legislator, I have some of the bills I was able to move. It took maybe 20 years in some cases. And I know a lot of people don't stay in there necessarily that long, but I think persistence and just knowing that you're really on the right path, you're doing the right thing, and getting the support, you know, and advocate. So as legislators, we can't do anything on our own. It's all about having advocates who support you, who feel that you're on the right path, coalitions that build around some of the issues that you're interested in. So, you know, bringing stakeholders together, bringing people together who really feel that what you're doing is the right thing, and just get out there. We just need more women's voices out there. So I encourage you, you're young, it's a good time to be thinking about all of this. If I had it to do over, I think I would have jumped in earlier than I did. I was in my 50s when I started out in the legislature, having worked as a nurse, clinical specialist nurse for 25 years, and I think the one thing I would probably want to get in the pipeline earlier. So I encourage all of you to get in the pipeline of whatever your dreams are. Get in early. And I think there's much more available now to help women who are, you know, are having babies. I mean, I've seen it even in the legislature, where when I came in, it was more the women had a harder time. They came in, you know, in their 50s and 60s after they'd raised their children. But now I see many more younger women coming in who have children. And I think husbands have stepped up, and there's much more collaboration and cooperation, I think, between couples today than there were years ago. It's like you said, it was your husband expected you to have the meal on the table. I had the same thing. And, but it's different
We
today.
wouldn't eat. They waited for me.
And by the way, I'm happy to see that you're interested in adding A to STEM. because
Yes.
That's something that we've actually been working on here in Massachusetts.
Fantastic, STEAM.
So my final question before I open it up to the audience is if you could give a piece of advice to your college self or your high school self, because that's the age of our audience, what would that piece of advice be?
Two pieces of advice, like, you know, like communication skills. That's the key. You know, no matter what you like pick up in this STEAM, like legislation, like whatever you pick up, like communication is key. You cannot really just work all by yourself. You need to be able to communicate, like, you know, your thoughts. You may not like that person. You may not be feeling comfortable, like, working with that person, like, but then, like, building a team and, like, you know, like, making your voice heard and, like, making them understand your point of view. So communication is the key. And, like, when I was in school, or, like, you know, when I was in the university, I was not participating in any, like, you know, like major team activities, especially sports. That's one thing, like, if I can go back in time, I would change, wherein, like, I would have more team sports, and, like, I would have participated, like, because communication skills and, like, being a team player, that's utmost important for you to, like, you know, irrespective of whatever field you choose, that's very important. Like, if you have difficulties getting along with your friends, like your classmates, and, like, you know, like conveying, like, in a nice way your point of view, it's going to be much difficult for you in life, and, like, in family, like, you know, like, even with spouse, even with family, kids, everything, like communication and being a team player is extremely important, according to me.
I think being here today is a sign that you're sort of thinking toward the future. So I would just encourage you again to get involved in your schools, design your own, if you have particular interests, develop a club of friends or colleagues or other students that might have an interest in the same issue, and just be active, get involved. And I think, and again, I think coming here shows that you have an interest in wanting to figure out what's best in terms of the future for yourselves. So.
I would say figure out who you are and be your authentic self. Like sometimes we try to imitate other people and it doesn't work well. Of course, we can learn a lot from others, but we need to kind of take time and figure out like what is my version of this, or how I can do this thing that I admire. Because if you're not really authentic, then none of this works. Not advocating for others, not progressing. Like it can work for a short term, but in the long term, you really need to double down on who you are and how you make sense of it all with who you are.
And mine, I think I've said a couple of times, is enjoy the journey. Life is a journey. It's like a journey to a destination. And sometimes the detour is actually better than the destination. Don't be afraid of when something happens that's different than you thought. You really will become, I have found, a much more satisfied person when you don't contemplate stuff that doesn't go your way. One of my favorite social media tools is Snapchat, because it's gone. Great, 2 seconds and it's gone. That's one, it's life changes, and just enjoy it. You've got so many things that are out there, and I'd say enjoy your journey.
So, any questions from the audience? I know you guys prepared questions, so someone has to have one.
What's the biggest risk you took throughout your career?
My biggest risk was, it turned out to be probably one of the best things that happened, is moving to Germany. It wasn't something I was really looking to do at that point in my life. I told you guys I have 4 children, and they were at various ages. But moving a family from Michigan to a place that is a brand new culture with a very different language that I spoke, no German, it felt like a big risk at the time. But again, had I overthought it, I actually contemplated not taking the job. So to me, it was a huge risk at the time, but upon reflection, it's probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, both personally and professionally, because it really afforded me a lens that I would have never had. Just living in a different community, having my children be in completely different schools in an international system. I mean, it makes them more worldly, and it really brought me back, when I came back to the U.S., with just a broader bandwidth. So that was, to me, the biggest risk, is moving.
One of the biggest and also first risks I took when I was in the military. So the military is a very hierarchical system, and there's chain of command, and you're not supposed to go above the person that is your commander. And I was very displeased with what someone who's the commander of my commander's commander did. So it's pretty higher up, and I thought it's a huge mistake, and I wouldn't stand up for it, and I decided to just go and tell this person that. And in the military, like, you can go to jail, like, for that. But I was fearless, and I did that, and it turned out that he was happy with the feedback. He told me that whenever I feel this way again, I should go to him directly. And his door is open to my feedback. So I felt encouraged that I spoke up and that I should continue doing it. I think over the years I learned that I should pick my battles, and sometimes it's not worth it as much. But if it's something that I really strongly believe in, then I should definitely speak up about it.
my risk was very similar to what Daisy was saying, but then like I think like hers was much more like, difficult than what I went through. I moved from Georgia, like I lived in Georgia for like 7 years and I moved to Michigan. It was a big decision for me. I had a house there, my husband was there, I pretty much knew everybody in the city, I knew everybody in the office, and I've been there for so long, and it was a kind of a tropical weather, and that's where, that's kind of where the weather I was grown up with, I was growing up back home in India. So Michigan, like I have no idea what snow is, and then there's always that fear factor. Like people talk about Michigan, Detroit, and there was some scary factor to it, and I needed to leave back my husband, there, and my daughter just turned 2. I don't know whether you guys have heard like your stories of what you all did when you were 2 years old, terrible twos. That's what they talk about. I took my 2-year-old daughter and then moved. It was kind of a cultural change for myself, like doing that, and it was for my daughter too when she moved, because she was predominantly having a different set of kids, and then when she moved here, she was completely shocked too. But then we went through that, and we are very glad that we made that change. And it's been 4 years now. I took a job, different job within the same company, but then a different department and everything. I'm so glad that I took that risk and moved. Was not so easy, but then that I think even built a reputation for me in my organization, wherein I'm open for change. I'm open to support the organization in whatever way it wants, they want from me. So that was the biggest risk I did, and I'm glad that I did it.
For me, the biggest risk was running for public office, putting myself out there, and I feel like I learn every day. It's still a challenge, I think, almost every day, and so I would just say, just keep going, keep learning, keep going, and I think you stop when you're not having fun. When you stop having fun, when you stop figuring out how to get beyond, what obstacle or problem that came your way, you just continue to move on. And I think it's great to take risks, and you might fail, and it could be a problem, but you can pick yourself up and keep going. I think that's what's so important, is just to keep moving, keep going, not get discouraged.
Thank you. All right, so let's just give the panelists a round of applause.